Hello everyone, this is Michael, and today we are going to talk about the band Queensrÿche. In fact, we're going to rank every single album and every live DVD and live release from the Seattle Quintet. Queensrÿche emerged from Seattle in the early 80s, which was about 10 years before Seattle kind of exploded with the grunge music scene, but Seattle was still nevertheless a thriving music scene when Queensrÿche came out in the early 80s. They were grouped along with many other heavy metal bands when they first emerged, because there was the whole new wave of British heavy metal, and then you also had bands, especially on the West Coast, that were coming out. But Queensrÿche soon separated themselves from the pack of other metal bands by embracing progressive music ideas and having more ambitious songwriting efforts. They wrote about the environment and politics, and they were very had lots to say about society and politics and greed and corporate religious hypocrisy, etc. And that enabled them to separate themselves from other heavy metal bands and kind of became known as the thinking man's heavy metal band. Queensrÿche in many ways was a pioneering force in terms of the progressive metal genre. They were one of the first bands to really be labeled as progressive metal, combining the heavy metal kind of heavy riffs, double bass drums, fast operatic vocals, but also integrating them with progressive ideas from bands such as Pink Floyd and other progressive bands such as that. So let's get into it. We've got 17 full-length albums, 5 concert videos, 5 live releases. You add all that up, we have 165 studio songs, 87 concert videos, and a total of over 35 hours of music. Now, full disclosure here. I was a Queensrÿche fan from the very beginning. I picked up the first EP, the Queensrÿche EP, which was released in 1983, at the record store, and I bought it solely based on the album cover. I could tell you why, but there was a good reason why, and fell in love with it immediately, and Queensrÿche quickly became my favorite band, and I would say from that point, 1983, until about the late 90s when they really started to fall off, Queensrÿche was my unquestioned favorite band. I saw them on every tour that they did during that time. I bought their albums on day of release, and as you're going to see in a minute, I think very highly of them. Now, since that time period, it's been a bit of a rocky road, but we'll look at the good, the bad, and the ugly here. So we can see the Queensrÿche EP I have as an 89. Looking at my list, that's close to a 90, which I consider a true classic. Now, it's just an EP. There's only 4 songs, so, I mean, this isn't a classic album because it's only 4 songs. But this album hit me in the way that 18-year-old, 17-year-old me wanted to be hit. Like I say, 5-octave operatic vocals from Geoff Tate. We had the dual twin guitar attack, lead guitar attack of Chris DeGarmo and Michael Wilton, and we had the thumping bass from Eddie Jackson, and we got Scott Rockenfield on the drums. And those are the 5 original members, and they would be the only 5 members for the first 15 years or so of the band. We didn't have a lot of changes in band members during this time. As for the music we find on the EP, it is pretty standard early 80s heavy metal. It's not that different than what you would have heard from other bands employing this. I think the 2 obvious comparisons for me are Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, because both were heavy metal bands with a lot of, both have dual guitar attacks, both use a lot of melody in both the vocals and the guitar. Something that I feel is missing in a lot of modern heavy metal is melody. And then you had operatic vocals, whether it was Geoff Tate with Queensrÿche, or Bruce Dickinson with Iron Maiden, or Rob Halford with Judas Priest. That formula was there, and you could make a pretty solid argument that this EP sounded very much like an Iron Maiden, Judas Priest type of album. The one song I will mention is The Lady Wore Black, which is a unabashed power ballad, It starts out quietly with acoustic guitars, and then you kind of have the anthemic chorus that kicks in. And this came out in '83, so it was kind of the late '80s when power ballads became almost an entire genre unto themselves. But it wasn't totally unique in '83. There were other bands doing power ballads back then. I think of bands like the Scorpions and Night Ranger had those types of things. But it showed that they had a wider palette than just, banshee wails and double bass guitar, or double bass drums going crazy. Brilliant debut effort from my perspective. Back then we didn't have internet, so I didn't know what was going on with the band. They weren't getting played on the radio or MTV. There wasn't a lot being written about them in any of the magazines, and those were about the only places you could hear or read about music. And so I really didn't know what was going on with the band. But I do remember the following fall, I was at college then, and I heard on the radio the guy said, "Here's the new song from Queensrÿche," and the guy said the album was coming out the next day. And I remember running down to Sundance Records in downtown San Marcos, Texas, and picking up my copy of The Warning, which, as you can see, I have rated as a 96, which is almost a perfect album. And this album still resonates with me. It resonates with the band too, because they are currently touring. The iteration of the band that exists today is currently touring, and the set that they're playing focuses almost exclusively on the EP and the Warning album. So they're going all the way back to the beginning on this tour. Let's look at the songs individually, and you can see that almost all of them are 100 by me. The only 80s are The Warning and Take Hold of the Flame, which is kind of funny because one is the title song, Warning, and then Take Hold of the Flame is by far the most popular and commercially successful song from this album. It features Geoff Tate, one of Geoff Tate's great high-pitched sustained wails. You'll see a lot of reaction videos on YouTube about Geoff Tate. X person reacts to Geoff Tate, Take Hold of the Flame. The reason it's an 80, I used to rank this as 100. It's a little lower for me now, just because it's become overplayed for me. I've just heard it too often. I'll also point this out, that the production on this album is not great. It's not that the production was really bad, it's that the mixing was done poorly. The band had gone over budget in the making of the album, and so the record company was fed up and took the masters and hired a guy to mix the album without the band knowing it. The guy mixing it didn't know the band, was not a heavy metal mixer, didn't know what the band was looking for, and what he came up with was never heard by the band before being released, and so it's not what they envisioned, and it is a little muddy and not the greatest production. The other thing I will mention is that the song order was messed up. The band originally had it designed a different way, but it ended up this. The most notable thing is that the album should not have kicked off with the song Warning. That should have been the next to last song. The album intro was supposed to be NM156, which makes a lot more sense to me because I always thought that made a much better intro and seemed like a more intuitive or natural song to open with than Warning. Nevertheless, really, really great stuff here. It's a significant departure from what we heard on the EP in terms of the sound palette. You have them kind of starting to sound like a machine a little bit, especially on the song NM156, which is about the relationship between man and computers. And that was something that they were striving for. They're striving, especially the guitar sounds were designed to, they were endeavoring to kind of sound like a machine, and they do that quite a bit here. Geoff Tate's vocals throughout this entire album are just unreal, beginning to end, but I want to comment on a couple highlights. We mentioned that moment on Take Hold of the Flame. The song Child of Fire has a breakdown at about the 2/3 mark, and it's basically the band backing a very slow, quiet backing to Geoff Tate, and his vocal performance on that is unreal. And then also the Roads to Madness, which in many ways showed what the band's true capability was. Roads to Madness is a 10-minute, it's prog metal, okay? People might not have called it progressive metal back in the day, but it is what it is. It's a 10-minute song. It's got orchestral arrangement in the middle when they break it down. It's got a sophisticated, mature arrangement. It is a masterpiece, and it really, in my opinion, when I was listening to this album day after day after day when I was 18, 19 years old, that song was just the apex to me and really represented what the band was capable of. I can't say enough. This album has withstood the test of time. I remember Kerrang! Magazine, which was a British magazine that you could not get in America very easily, but I somehow stumbled across one. And the guy who reviewed this album thought it was as brilliant as I did, and I just felt such a kinship that I wasn't the only one, because commercially, this album did not do particularly well. As I mentioned, Take Hold of the Flame got some radio airplay, and got the band a little bit of notoriety, but the album as a whole was not particularly successful commercially. Critically, it was well received. But Queensrÿche was still fairly underground, if you will, at this point. They weren't selling out arenas or anything like that. They did not have a lot of radio airplay, and so for me, it was kind of one of those things where I knew about them and thought they were great. Would have liked to have seen them be able to headline shows on that tour. I did see them live. They opened for Kiss in San Antonio, and after 45 minutes of Queensrÿche, which was really great, but bare bones type 45-minute opener show, Kiss came on. This is when they were not wearing makeup and all their outfits and everything, and did, by their standards, of really low effort, low in terms of stage presentation, was not spectacular. I stayed for about 2 or 3 of their songs and left. Queensrÿche did tour with both Dio and who's the other band? I think Judas Priest. I would have much preferred to, or no, it was Dio and Iron Maiden. It was other bands that they toured for. I would have so much preferred to have seen them open for either one of those. That would have been great. So it was 2 years later that Queensrÿche would release RageForOrder 1986, and you can see that I've got this listed as a 91. So we've now had 3 releases, 2 full-length albums, and a 4-song EP, and all of them are right at that 90 or higher level, which is an exceedingly high threshold or standard for a band to meet on all of their first releases. I think Led Zeppelin is about the only other band I've done this exercise with that had that high early in their, or consistently early in their releases. And RageForOrder was, again, a step forward for the band. They were not simply recreating what they had done before. They've gone even farther down the path towards this kind of mechanized sound that they were going for. They employ that a lot throughout this album. They have almost industrial sounding songs on a lot of the throughout the album. The songs are more progressive. The topics are still somewhat fantasy tinged, but they also more personal, relationship oriented, maybe dark takes on relationships. But this was, again, a step forward. They were not just redoing what they'd done before. They've been evolving each of the releases that they came out with. Let's look at the individual songs, and you can see it's pretty much bifurcated, either all 80s or all 100s. These ratings are slightly different than what I would have given them 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and I would say what has happened is some of the songs on the first half of the album, first of all, the songs are relatively short. There were 11 songs on this album, 6 on side 1, 5 on side 2. The first 5 songs, I'll have 80 here now. I can tell you that I used to think I Dream in Infrared was a 5-star 100 song. Gonna Get Close to You also. And then the last half of the album, just basically perfect in my opinion. But I want to talk about the 3-song sequence that ended side 1 and began side 2, which was Surgical Strike, Ne Rigel, and Chemical Youth. Because those are the ones that I think really kind of most aggressively employ this kind of industrial, kind of mechanized sound that they were going for. Surgical Strike is about a Air Force pilot targeting targeting somebody for, dropping bombs on them, I guess, in a surgical strike. It has a section in the middle that has this weird breakdown, and just in 1986, I thought it was just the coolest thing ever. Then Ne Regel is just a uniquely Queensrÿche song, and it really super cool. And then it has this opening that builds tension and has, normally when you build tension like this, especially on an Oper, when you get to the point you release it and it's gonna, you're gonna go fast and loud. They didn't do that. They built the tension up and then they just let it go, and it went from the tension building to a quiet, slow sound, and it just kind of had this, this mechanized feel to it, and it was totally cool. And they opened their concert that I saw on this tour with that song doing that, and man, Geoff Tate just had the audience in his hands, and that song is really cool from beginning to end, unique, unlike anything else you can. And then the song that we're actually listening to is Chemical Youth, and this is a hard rocker, but it's got these, I honestly don't know what the lyrics are about. It sounds like somebody kind of, a new generation that's kind of embracing revolution or something. I don't know exactly. But the three of those together, I remember I had a cassette, so it had both side 1 and side 2 on one, because it was a blank cassette that held 45 minutes on each side. And I remember I'd listen to that 3-song sequence a lot. The last song I will remember is an acoustic, quiet, ballady song about satellite spying on us, which is a pretty advanced topic for a heavy metal band to cover in 1986. London, to me, sounds like about a what I think is a vampire kind of regretting the fact that he's living forever while other people are not. I Dream in Infrared, like I said, I used to think that was a 5-star song. It has this really cool intro with an acoustic guitar. Man, I like this album a lot. Loved it when it came out. Have never not loved it since. Love it today. I will put, I've given it a 91 for a reason. I love this album. Lots of other people did not. It was not commercially successful, unlike The Warning, which at least had Take Hold of the Flame. None of the songs on this album received any airplay or any MTV play. Queensrÿche had now been around for a few years, and they hadn't really progressed beyond where they were early. They were a good live touring band. Geoff Tate was a good frontman, and the band was really, really tight and professional on stage. Really, really great live band. And they were earning a reputation, and the kids who would go see them opening for bands like Kiss and Dio and Iron Maiden, etc., would enjoy them. And there was an underground following, and kids that were into heavy metal knew about them. But beyond that, they didn't have a lot of fans. I will point out that I was really lucky because Texas was a pretty big market for heavy metal bands in the 80s, and for all I know now. And so Queensrÿche did do a small 10 or 12 city tour where they got to headline, and I saw them in San Antonio playing the Japanese Sunken Gardens Theater, which is an absolutely really cool outdoor venue to see a band. And me and my buddy were able to get right up to the front, at the very front of the stage, from the beginning to the end. And one of my absolute favorite concerts ever. Beautiful outdoor venue. It was a beautiful night. The weather was perfect. Just fantastic concert. All right, so like I say, at this point, the band has not moved beyond being kind of one of those bands that open up for lots of other bands. But their ambitions were not were restrained in any way when they came out with OperationMindcrime in 1988, which I have here as a 94. Most people consider OperationMindcrime to be the band's their greatest accomplishment, their greatest achievement, and I'm not going to argue with those people. I think it's fantastic. OperationMindcrime is without doubt a heavy metal classic. It deserves all the accolades that it receives. It gets listed on top metal band, top metal albums. top hard rock albums, top progressive metal albums. It's a concept album. The band does so many things right on this album, and they really don't miss at all. I want to talk about several things that make this such a good thing. The production is outstanding from beginning to end. You can hear all of the songs really clearly. 2, they employ a shit ton of kind of background sounds to help flesh out the story and augment the oral experience, if you will. Specifically, I'm going to cite the very beginning of the album. You hear a television playing. It's a news program reporting about a series of religious and political murders that have rocked this city. Seem to have stopped as soon as they began. A suspect is in custody. Suspect is being held in custody at State Mental Hospital. Then you hear a nurse's shoes tapping, and she checks on the what appears to be our protagonist, the patient. She says she says you should be sleeping, but she calls him a bastard, which links him. Anyway, then the protagonist starts speaking, and he says, "I remember now. I remember how it started." That little opening is utterly brilliant, and the way it's not music, but it tells you so much about the story. Let's see, we got a series of religious and political murders. We have a suspect in custody, which apparently is our protagonist because he starts telling the story. He talks about how I can't remember yesterday, I just remember doing what they told me. So he feels like you immediately feel like, okay, he's supposed to be the bad guy, but he's also a protagonist, and he's talking about he feels he was manipulated. All of that in like 30 seconds, and that is one reason Operation Mindcrime works so well as a concept album. Is throughout the album, they have all these accessories, if you will, these non-musical accessories told through these background sounds, the same way that Pink Floyd used a lot of background sounds on like Dark Side of the Moon. Queensrÿche was using those to great effect throughout Operation Mindcrime. Another reason it works so well. The story is coherent and easy to understand. So many of even the best concept albums in rock history are a bit dense and maybe not too easy to understand. This is not, even though it is absolutely a rock opera. We've got a protagonist who is an assassin and a junkie. He's in love with a sister of the church, Sister Mary, who also used to be a junkie and a former prostitute. We've got corrupt government officials. We've got corrupt politicians. We've got the evil and manipulative and mysterious Dr. X, who is pulling our protagonist Nikki's strings and has basically brainwashed him into doing these assassinations. It's a super, super compelling story. They also mix in a enormous amount of social commentary here. They mention the hypocrisy of the church, the corruption of government officials, the way that the 1% rules America and that laws don't apply to them, and that 1% uses the police to hold the riffraff, if you will, down. This is 1988. It's probably more applicable today in 2024 than it was in 1988. Just a stunning, stunning achievement in terms of what a band could do with a concept album. And for it to be a heavy metal band accomplishing this was just unheard of in 1988. In many ways, this set the template for what a progressive metal band could be and what they could accomplish. And it is the album that I think made Queensrÿche influence, a big influence on many other future bands that, I don't think people... If progressive metal had been a term before 1988, I don't remember hearing it. I think that this in many ways was kind of the official blooming of a progressive metal, and what bands like Fate's Warning and Metallica was doing some progressive metal. Dream Theater they hadn't released their first album yet, but all of those bands, Fate's Warning, Queensrÿche, Metallica, and Dream Theater. Metallica's more of a thrash band, but they had some progressive elements in their early years. And I just can't say enough about this album. It's spectacular. If you've never heard it, man, find yourself a glass of wine and a herb that you like, settle down, put your headphones on, and get ready for about 65 minutes of just intense stuff. I also want to mention that the album was 65 minutes long. In many ways, it was the first album I ever bought that was CD length. I didn't even know what a CD was in 1988. Well, I think I did. I knew what it was, but I didn't own one or a CD player. But this album was 65 minutes in length because it was designed to take advantage of the length of a CD. Most albums prior to the CDs were around 40 minutes in total length. So again, just a spectacular album, deserves all the accolades. And again, a departure from what they'd done before. So looking back at the catalog now, look at this. You've got 4 albums, all 4 90 or higher. Each one different than the one before. So now you've got a catalog of a fairly broad array of music at this point, even though it's all heavy metal, it's all rock, it's all 80s, all of those things are there. But this is not, Quiet Riot singing We're Not Gonna, Twisted Sister singing We're Not Gonna Take It, or Quiet Riot singing Come On Feel the Noise. This is heavy metal that is completely different and separate from that stuff, or bands like Poison or Warrant or Dokken or Bon Jovi or any of those types of bands. This is a different style of music. Alright, so Mindcrime was critically well received. It got a lot of accolades upon release. I had it on. I don't think there's ever been an album that I played as much as that album. It just was the right time, right place for me, and so I listened to it a lot. But it did not move the needle a whole lot initially. It didn't get any radio airplay, and it really wasn't until almost a year later. This album came out in the spring of '88. I think it was in January or February of '89 that the music video for the last song, The Eyes of a Stranger, was released and MTV started playing it, and that took off. And that video taking off really propelled Queensrÿche's career, because as a result of that, the video became heavy airplay on MTV. A lot of people picked up the album because of that, and then a lot of people became Queensrÿche fans because of that. And so the album did go gold eventually, and then platinum, I think, a couple years later. And up till now, again, on this tour for Operation Mindcrime, they were not headlining. When I saw them in Washington, D.C. opening for Metallica, so pretty good show there. You have Queensrÿche touring Operation Mindcrime and Metallica touring And Justice for All, which is kind of interesting because both of those albums are pretty bitter about the current state of American politics in 1988. But as a result of the popularity of The Eyes of a Stranger video and that propelling Mindcrime to gold status, that really propelled Queensrÿche into a higher stratus of popularity. They were no longer just appealing to, hardcore heavy metal kids like me. They had a more broad appeal. So in many ways you would have thought they would double down on the Operation Mindcrime approach and either have another very progressive, very politically oriented, social commentary, let's be serious, and they did not. Their next album, Empire, which came out in 1990, was a complete change again. No more social commentary. There's a little bit, but these songs are much more accessible than Operation Mindcrime. In many ways, some of these are pop songs, often about relationships and love, and just ballads, and all just impeccably produced. The sound on Empire, in my ways, that was the epitome of that big rock sound that was popular in this time period, and it was hit out of the park. The sound and the production on this album is just outstanding. But it is a complete change from what the band was doing on Operation Mindcrime. So it showed that they were constantly evolving. Now you see that I have it only ranked as an 83, so I don't like it quite as much as the other 4 releases, but an 83 is still outstanding. So not a bad album in any way. It's a really great album. It sold zillions of copies, mostly because the song Silent Lucidity, which you see I have listed as a 60 here, that's really an 80. If I were to go back, I'd call that an 80 now. Silent Lucidity was an acoustic ballad that had this kind of Pink Floyd element sound to it, some orchestration in the back again. And that was a big hit right out of the gate. And a bunch of these songs on here became moderate MTV hits. I remember Jet City Woman, the song Empire, the song Silent Lucidity, and the song Anybody Listening. I remember Another Rainy Night Without You. I remember all of these songs getting played on MTV and getting airplay back in the day. It was one of those just big, massive hits, and I think it went double platinum for them. And Queensrÿche had made it. This was the top of their popularity. What I find amazing is that you'd think that this band that had just released an album that it went platinum and had a big, huge ballad hit and big radio play, that when they would do their concert in support of that album, that album would be the main focus. But that's not what Queensrÿche did. Instead, they used the opportunity where they were now a headlining band and they had a lavish stage show. They used the opportunity to present Operation Mindcrime in its entirety, which was really a bold move, and I'm so happy they did because I got to see them, and the show was awesome. Very long show because the first 45 minutes was a bunch of songs from Empire and I think one other song, and then they did the full version of Roads to Madness, which is that 10-minute epic from The Warning that I would call arguably the best song in the band's entire catalog. And then I remember the Roads to Madness ending is kind of fades away, and then they brought in the opening from Operation Mindcrime, and they did that in its entirety, which is a good hour and 15 minutes, hour and 10 minutes of music. And then they did a couple songs as a encore, so in total you had a good 2-hour 20-minute show. It was awesome, and I'm so happy that they did give Operation Mindcrime the live presentation that it warranted. Looking at the songs on Empire, Silent Lucidity is the obvious big hit, but you have Jet City Woman and Another Rainy Night, which are very poppy, very accessible sing-along anthems. Della Brown, which is a song about a homeless person, has a really tasteful, great guitar solo. It's a little longer song. I think it's about 6-7 minutes. The Thin Line is another dark song about relationships. And then Anybody Listening is the last song, is another socially conscious one where the lyrics are encouraging listeners such as myself to kind of question, who's watching the watchers out there? Do you trust the media to tell you what's true? Do you trust the people that are supposedly the authorities? Do you trust them when it comes to what they're saying? So, in many ways, this was the apex of Queensrÿche's career. They had an album that I think reached number 2 or number 3. They had MTV songs getting played on MTV everywhere. They're selling out arenas, not just in North America, but in Europe. They were a worldwide recognized band. They toured all over the world. And to be fair, at this point, they'd been doing it for 10 years, and they needed time off. It had been a long slog of record an album, tour incessantly as an opening band, record an album, tour incessantly, record an album. So it's been 10 years now. And so it would be 4 years before their next album came out, which was Promised Land. And you can see I give this another very high rating. Now, some context needed here. 4 years had passed since Empire had been released and Promised Land was released. And in that time, the music landscape, the pop music, rock music landscape had completely changed. In 1990, you still had a lot of hair metal bands. Guns N' Roses might have been the biggest rock band around in 1990. By 1994, that stuff was completely out of fashion, and grunge and alternative ruled now. So out with Guns N' Roses, in with Pearl Jam and the Smashing Pumpkins and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and bands of that ilk. Queensrÿche paid no attention to any of that, and they once again did a completely different album than what they'd done before, where Empire was accessible and bright sounding and had poppy anthemic sing-along songs. Promised Land was dark and brooding and very progressive. It's, in my opinion, the most progressive album in the Queensrÿche catalog. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think it is a underrated gem. And as you can see now, we've now had 5 full-length releases and an EP, and all of them are bangers. And that run right there is why I was such a huge Queensrÿche fan. They basically could do no wrong, in my opinion, because every album had been great. Every show that I had seen had been great. There hadn't been any long absences. They didn't change members. They didn't have any drama. They weren't on MTV News for being late for shows or getting in fights with each other, anything like that. They just could do no wrong, in my opinion. And so let's look at the songs here. The 1-2 opening of IMI and Damage is just... IMI is a super cool song. By the way, you don't see the first song listed here, which is, I think it's called 928, which is just a little 1-minute kind of ambient soundscape that the drummer Scott Rockenfield wrote. I just mixed that in with IMI. That's all one song for me. But IMI is a great takedown on the media. Damage is one of these dark songs where the person seems to be struggling mentally, which is a theme throughout this whole album. Out of Mind is also, it's about somebody visiting somebody in a mental facility and then finding that they themselves are the patient there. Bridge is a very personal song by Chris DeGarmo about his father, who had not been a part of his life when he was young, and now when Chris DeGarmo is a famous rock star, his dad reaches out to him and wants to build a relationship now, build that bridge that was missing. Promised Land, oh my god, this is a just tour de force. Geoff Tate's vocals on this are amazing, and this is a song about looking back on life, and you've reached the promised land and you're finding it unfulfilling. And it's probably a little bit of a autobiographical in the band, talking about, okay, we reached this pinnacle of success, why aren't we happy? Disconnected, another very mechanized song. Again, brilliant vocal effort by Geoff Tate. My Global Mind, One More Time, is Someone Else, man. That is as good an effort as you're going to get. I love every one of those songs. One More Time especially is a very underrated gem. Someone Else here on this version is just piano and Geoff Tate. And Geoff, again, his vocals are just impeccable. Throughout this entire run, Geoff Tate is a god to me. It's one thing to have operatic vocals. King Diamond has operatic vocals. His songs are unlistenable to me because he's always just a high-pitched scream for the most part. What Geoff Tate does is he uses his vocals as an instrument almost. He can elicit any range of emotions, I feel like. He can be very dark and brooding. He can be anthemic and you know, euphoric. I talk a lot about the bands and the music that I like are the ones that can combine light and dark. And when I say light and dark, I mean they can be fast, they can be slow. They can be loud, they can be quiet. They can be anthemic, they can be brooding. They can be urgent, they can be relaxed. And they can transition in and out of those things effectively and seamlessly and do so in a way that tells a story. And Geoff Tate is just brilliant at that. And this album, man, he's just got highlights all over the place on that. But Someone Else is a piano-based piece, and his vocals are just really amazing on that. So, again, looking through here the history now, Queensrÿche can do no wrong, and this period that we're talking about here is the peak period of Queensrÿche. A lot of people will say it ended with Empire. I disagree. I think that Promised Land is just as good and as important a part of that early period as any. We're going to see that from this point forward, it's not the same. Things are going to change, and they're never going to be as good as they were during this time period. While I was a huge fan of Promised Land, others were not. The album actually went to number 3 on the charts, as I recall, and that was because all the hardcore Queensrÿche fans like myself went out and bought it the week that it came out, and it promptly disappeared. None of the songs received any notable airplay on radio or MTV, and Queensrÿche was kind of out of step with the times. Like I say, alternative music was really big during this time period. And I did see the band on the tour. I saw them at the Starplex in Dallas, and it was a good show. Probably not my favorite of all of theirs just because of the venue. I hate all those outdoor places where people sit on the lawns. The sight lines and the acoustics are always terrible. But still, like, for me, Promised Land, great album, but commercially was not a success, and was a symbol of what was going to happen with Queensrÿche moving forward, as they do not enjoy much commercial success from this point forward. All right, they would come out with another album. I thought it was 97. I guess it was just 2 years later. Hearinthenowfrontier, which is an awkward sounding album title. The album cover was equally weird, and as you can see, I have a much lower opinion of this album than anything the band had done previously. And I do say that this is them evolving yet again. The sound on this album is completely different than anything they've done before. It's a stripped down sound. We're actually hearing this song. This is the best song on the album, in my opinion. Some people fly. Stripped down sound, not progressive at all. We even have one song where Chris DeGarmo is the lead vocals. Just a much different effort than what they'd done previously, and I feel it was the first time the band not sure what they wanted to do and reacting to trends in the music world as opposed to just doing what they wanted to do. That's what it feels like to me. I don't know. And we can see there's a lot of songs on here. There are 2 really great songs. One is this one, Some People Fly, which is a song about, live your dream. Try to live your dreams, because at least try to spread your wings and fly. If you don't, you're probably going to regret it. And then the last song, which is Spool. Both of those are classic Queensrÿche 5-minute rockers. Then we get a couple of good songs, 80 level songs, The Voice Inside and Hit the Black. But then after that, we have a lot of, some decent songs, Sign of the Times and Get a Life, You. Some of these songs are very poppy sounding, and I can say that for me, I was not a big fan of all that stuff. But also, we get one truly horrible song. A 20 is what's it called? Anytime, Anywhere. That song is unlistenable to me. We have 2 others that rank only 40s. So I also want to point out that the songwriting credits were starting to change. For most of all that early period that we looked at, you had 3 primary songwriters. Geoff Tate and Chris DeGarmo were no doubt the number 1 and number 2 songwriters, and they were really together I think both of them averaged about 7 song credits on those albums, when the albums were having anywhere from, say, 10 to 12 or 13 songs. And then Michael Wilton, the other guitarist, also would get a lot of song credits. By Hearinthenowfrontier, Michael Wilton is contributing very little, and it's almost all almost all Geoff Tate and Chris DeGarmo, and more Geoff Tate than Chris DeGarmo. This album was not critically received well, and commercially it didn't do well. And during the tour, in support of this album, you had a number of things happen that started to further derail Queensrÿche's career. One is that their record company went out of business. So they're on tour. The tour is being fronted by the record company, and the record company goes out of business. That left the band to fund their own tour. 2, Geoff Tate had vocal issues during a large part of this tour, and they had to cancel some dates, and they would shorten the set list on a number of other dates. I saw them again in San Antonio, and they only played for about an hour and 15 minutes, which was deeply disappointing, because to me, I paid full price and I'm expecting a 2-hour show, and right as, you know, the show's going well, it's over. And finally, at the end of the tour, Chris DeGarmo announced to the rest of the band that he was resigning and wasn't going to be a part of the band anymore. So, in short order, Queensrÿche lost their record company, one of their creative forces, and one of their lead guitarists. And the way things had been was now officially over. The original 5 were no longer. The band needed to go find a record company. Their commercial fortunes had gone very downhill since hitting that apex in 1990 with Empire. To replace Chris DeGarmo, they brought in a guy named Kelly Gray. Kelly Gray had been a guitarist in a band called Myth with Geoff Tate prior to Geoff Tate joining Queensrÿche. But beyond that, he really wasn't known as a guitarist. He was known as a producer and engineer, and he'd produce things like Candlebox. And I can tell you, from my perspective, hearing that the guy who was associated with Candlebox coming in to replace Chris DeGarmo did not enthuse me. I was not excited about that prospect. And so we get, in 1999, their next release, which is Q2K. And as you can see, I don't think much more of this than I do Hearinthenowfrontier. Now let's recognize that an album that is a 60 is good. It's not horrible. It's not terrible. It just doesn't have a lot of great songs, or it's got some, bad lows. Q2K was, unlike any of their albums, this was largely the same thing as Hearinthenowfrontier. You've got detuned guitars. You've got, what's the word I'm looking for? This is not progressive metal. This isn't progressive rock. There's nothing progressive about any of this. Further, Geoff Tate's voice is just not the same as it was earlier. He's still strong and has good range, but it seems to have a sameness to it. His vocals used to be very dynamic, like he could do all kinds of different things, and now it sounds like every song's kind of the same. He is also starting to employ spoken words as opposed to actually singing on some songs, which later becomes almost the only thing he does. The only really great song on this is the final one, The Right Side of My Mind. I will point out that every album closer for the band has been a banger on all of these. I can tell you all of them. The EP was The Lady Wore Black, which is a great power ballad. The Warning was Roads to Madness, which is arguably their very best song and is a 10-minute prog metal epic. RageForOrder was I Will Remember, which is an acoustic song, 5-star song. OperationMindcrime was Eyes of a Stranger, the song that launched them into superstardom. Promised Land was Someone Else, which is a piano ballad that was awesome, that has great vocals from Tate. And then on Hearinthenowfrontier, it was Spool, one of the only 5-star songs on that album. And now on this album, The Right Side. So if nothing else, they were getting the final song right on all these albums. But the rest of these songs are, they're just kind of generic, and there's nothing distinctive about them. Early Queensrÿche, they sounded unique. They sounded very unlike anything else. Here, these songs just blend into one another. None of them are particularly notable. The What Kind of Man is also unlistenable, so this is the second album that has a 20 or a 1-star song on it. So we're not in a great space with the band at this point. I did not see them tour on this, now that I recall. So this is the first album where I didn't see the band tour. And I think when they came through, I think it was them and Judas Priest together. I could be wrong. All right, so it would be, I believe, 2003, yes, when we get their next album, Tribe. And I do know that in the recording of this, the band was struggling to come up with material, and they actually invited Chris DeGarmo back, and he did contribute songwriting credits and some guitar playing to about half the songs on this album. And as you can see, it's a little bit better than what we had on the last two albums. It's not as high as their early career, but it's not as bad as the last two ones. I will say this. The songs on this album, they're not as grungy or alternative sounding as the last two. There's a little bit of return to that old Queensrÿche kind of prog metal sound. But the song's really lacking ambition in here. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you distill a lot of songs down to, what the songwriter came up with originally, even a 6 or 7 minute song can be expressed when it's just the songwriter doing the lyrics and playing his little chords. A 7 minute song can be reduced down to like 2.5 or 3 minutes. And it is all the accessories that lengthen it. When I say accessories, what do I mean? Well, you might have a lengthy intro that goes for 45 seconds or a minute. You might have an extended bridge or break. You might have a section where you slow it down. You might have a long, lengthy outro. You might change at some part and do something different. So you can take something that started out as like 3 minutes, and you can do these accessories, and now it's a 5 or 6 or 7 minute song. They don't do any of that here. There's almost no instrumental sections that last for more than a few seconds. There's no long intros. There's no big, massive transitions or anything. The songs are better than what we've heard on the last, and you can see that I've got 5 songs here that are either 80 or 100. Tribe in particular is a really great song. Open is really good. I mean, these are good songs. It's a more the songwriting is better than what we had on the previous 2 albums, but I just feel like the band didn't do everything they could with these songs and maybe stretch them out or add some of those accessories that I was talking about. I did see them on this tour when they were doing a co-headlining gig with Dream Theater. I saw it at the famed Fox Theater in Atlanta. Awesome show. It concluded with the 2 bands on stage playing together, and the songs they played was Real World by Queensrÿche, which is a song that is not on any of their studio albums but is an awesome song, and then The Spirit Carries On, the ballad from Dream Theater's Metropolis 2, Scenes from a Memory. Man, that was a great show, and concluding with those 2 songs was awesome. My understanding is, however, that the bands really didn't get along too well, particularly the guys from Dream Theater seemed to have conflicts with Geoff Tate and Mike Stone. I forgot to mention Kelly Gray had been on board for Q2K as the guitarist replacing Chris DeGarmo, but he was out very quickly, apparently due to some drug usage issues, and taking his place as a touring member. He wasn't officially given band membership on Tribe, was guitarist Mike Stone, and he was in the touring entity when they toured with Dream Theater. And again, the Dream Theater guys seemed to take issue with Mike Stone, which was too bad. The show seemed great, and when they were on stage together, they were fabulous, but it's too bad that the tour seemed to result in the 2 groups deciding they weren't going to work ever again, I don't think, and I don't think they ever have. All right, so now you can see that after the 80s and early 90s, where they're just kicking out one great album after another, the last 3 have been less than that. They just aren't as good. They're not as high quality. And I can tell you at this point, to me, who I've gone from being a hardcore fan to I still like them, but I'm not expecting greatness anymore. It's been, by this point, 10 years since they'd done anything that was really high quality. And we'd seen one of the, main guys, the lead guitarist, leave. Geoff Tate's voice was not quite the same as it was been before. And then I heard Words I Dreaded, which was OperationMindcrime II. I forget where I read it or heard or whatever, but the idea that they were going to go back and revisit Operation Mindcrime smacked of desperation to me. It seemed like a band that couldn't come up with any good ideas, so they decided let's just mine our massive, critically acclaimed album from 1988 and loot it for whatever commercial success we can. So I wasn't excited about Operation Mindcrime II, but when it came out, it was really good. It did what it needed to in terms that rather it enhanced and augmented the story from Operation Mindcrime, so that if you add the two together, you have a bigger, better whole than just Operation Mindcrime 1. And it did not embarrass or deface or degrade the legacy of Operation Mindcrime 1 in any way. I really like this album and think it's very underrated. It's a lengthy album. I think there's however many songs there are. You can see I've got 4 or 5 songs that I rate as hundreds, and then another half dozen that I rate as 80s, and only 3 rated as 60s. So this is very good. It doesn't have that oral theatricality that the original album has. Like I say, the original album, Operation Mindcrime 1, was a masterpiece in storytelling, because it wasn't just songs that told the story, but all the little oral elements that I talked about that linked the songs together created this very movie-like, theater-like, play-like feel. That's missing here, and the album does sound disjointed, and I've learned that it was recorded in many different places, and in fact, it was recorded largely by Geoff Tate and the producer, whose name I'm forgetting right now. Let me look it up. I'll find it. Okay, so like I was saying, the album was written mostly by Geoff Tate and Jason Slater, who was the producer, and then Mike Stone, who was the guitarist. And in fact, it's been said that Scott Rockenfield didn't play any of the drums that actually ended up on the album. And all of this was revealed years later. I didn't know it at the time the album came out. So in many ways, this isn't really a Queensrÿche album. It's kind of a Geoff Tate album. It all works for me. A couple things that I really want to point out is the songwriting is really, really strong. It's not as socially critical as the original album was, and is more personal. But one thing I really love is the song The Chase. The Chase features Ronnie James Dio playing the antagonist, Dr. X, and then Geoff Tate is playing the protagonist, Nikki. And they employ very operatic vocal techniques where they have a give and take. They do layered vocals. They come together to harmonize at different points. And they also do that quite a bit on other songs that don't have Ronnie James Dio on it, but it has Pamela Moore playing the part of Sister Mary. And those are really well done throughout the album. And I think it really benefits. You also get a return to the 80s metal sound, especially on the guitars. The drum sound, I don't know what Scott Rockenfield's thing was, but it seemed like from this point forward he didn't want a big drum sound. He'd always have these flat sounding drums, although I say Scott Rockenfield, like I say, he apparently didn't even record any of the drums on this album. So nevertheless, I think this is a really great effort. It did not move the needle for the band. They did tour it, and by this point, when they're touring, they're playing clubs like Hard Rock Cafe and places like that. They're not playing arenas or even theaters anymore. They're doing clubs, essentially. But when I saw them, they did all of Operation Mindcrime 1 and then all of Operation Mindcrime 2, and it was presented kind of as a play, and it worked brilliantly. There's a DVD of it we're going to look at in a minute that captures it. I thought it was just exceptional. So again, Operation Mindcrime did not degrade the legacy of the Operation Mindcrime II. Did not degrade the legacy of the first album. It enhanced and augmented it, and for that I consider it a substantial success and easily the best effort since the band's peak in 1994. After what I thought was the success of Operation Mindcrime and seeing the band live play a really, really strong show, I got more optimistic about Queensrÿche again. I thought, well, Mike Stone seems to have come in, and he was a really good guitarist. I thought, hey, maybe, they've refound the magic. So it's very disappointing when their next album came out just a year later and was an album full of covers, which they called TakeCover. And 55 is a really, really low score here. Real simple rule when it comes to covers. It's either got to be better than the original or it's got to be different than the original. And there's not one of these that meets either of those criteria. These are generic, stale efforts that nobody needed, okay? Nobody needed another version of Almost Cut My Hair. Nobody needed a generic sounding version of Welcome to the Machine. Or I'll say this, the Neon Nights and version of Queen's Innuendo are good, but neither one is better than the original. Neither one is. And so not one of these songs meets that threshold that I think needs to exist in order for you to do a cover song, which is either be better or different than the original. None of these are. And to me, an album full of covers is symbolic of a band that is creatively bankrupt. They don't have anything to say, or they're unable to say. What I don't know is that during this time the band is slowly falling apart. They're not getting along well with each other. Geoff Tate is taking more and more control, partly because he wanted control, but also partly because the other guys just weren't contributing a lot of ideas and were willing to let Geoff Tate be the guy. 2 years later, they came out with American Soldier, which was supposed to be a concept album about not just American soldiers, but family that have members in the military and how war affects them. Every one of these songs is instantly forgettable. This is not the same band that was doing those prog metal classics in the 80s. There's nothing progressive about it. There's very little metal about it. These sound like generic mid-tempo rock songs. There's only one that I can even point out that I know have any memory of beyond just being bad, and that is the song The Voice. And the only reason I know this is because on this one, Geoff Tate's daughter contributes vocals, and she was, I think, 14 or 15 at the time, something like that, and her voice is not particularly strong. It reeks of nepotism. At this point, Geoff Tate is the lead singer and really only creative force, with Chris DeGarmo gone. Michael Wilton isn't contributing a lot of songs. His wife is the band's manager, and his, I believe, stepdaughter is running the fan club, and now he's got his daughter singing on the song. So you can see this has become a somewhat dysfunctional band where Geoff Tate and his family is making a lot of the decisions, and the result is just not good music. This was deeply disappointing to me after what I thought had been kind of a rebound with Operation Mindcrime II. So now we've had two just really bad albums. It's really hard to get a 50. Realize that I have the scale here from 0 to a 100. You can't be a 0. The lowest you can be is a 20, because a 1 star, which is a 20, means I hate the song. I want to turn it off as fast as I can. If every song was a 1-star song, the album would rank a 20. So to be a 50, is really, really bad. And at this point, I kind of lost interest in the band. And they did come out with I'm forgetting what time. They did come out with another album that is not on my list here. It's the one album not on the list. It's an album called DedicatedToChaos. And the reason I don't have it is I never bought it. And I didn't buy it because after these 2 albums, I really lost faith in the band. And then when the album came out, it got just horrific reviews. And I did listen to it in preparation for this video on Spotify, and it's horrid. It's unlistenable, and it doesn't have anything that connects the band with the rest of their catalog. They claimed it was a dance album when they released. It doesn't sound like a dance album to me. It doesn't sound like anything. It's got horns, and it's a disaster. What did happen as a result of that album and then disputes between Geoff Tate and the rest of the band is Geoff Tate got kicked out of the band. There's a lot of drama involved there, and I'm not going to go into it. You can look it up. It's ugly, it's petty, and it reflects poorly on everybody involved. Lawyers had to decide who was going to get what. For a while there, you had 2 different camps, both claiming the Queensrÿche name. On the one side, you had Scott Rockenfield, Michael Wilton, and Eddie Jackson, the 3 remaining original members of Queensrÿche. And in the other camp, you had Geoff Tate and his ilk. So you do get an album in 2013 called FrequencyUnknown. And if you think about the first 2 letters in the first letter in those 2 words, this is Geoff Tate giving a big FU to the rest of the band. This is his outfit, and it's generic, ill-advised music. The songs are, there's nothing remarkable about any of them. The music sounds like generic, cover band material. Like it sounds like Geoff Tate hired a band of people to cover Queensrÿche. Unremarkable and sad that it got to this point. Now that was the last time Geoff Tate would use Queensrÿche. The lawyers were still fighting at this point, and eventually the original 3 members got to use the name Queensrÿche, and Geoff Tate got to use OperationMindcrime and have sole control of that property. These are the songs from FrequencyUnknown. I honestly couldn't pick any one of these out. I do know that running backwards, if I did it now, I'd give it a 60, not an 80. And you can see even the album cover, you can see here, this is F right here, and over here is the U for FrequencyUnknown, and it's just petty, and all of this illustrates the utter dysfunction that the band was in at this point. They were not operating as a collaborative unit. They were operating as individuals, just could not get together in any way. The other 3 guys would team with a new singer named Todd LaTorre, and I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And he was a guy who knew Queensrÿche from their early days but didn't know their later material. And bringing him on, they did it, symbolized a couple things. One, they were going to re-embrace that style of music, going back to proggy metal. And number 2, when they would tour, they would be presenting songs from this era of the band, specifically The Warning and RageForOrder and the EP. They can't play songs from OperationMindcrime, I think. And so you get this album, which is titled Queensrÿche in 2013, and it gets a 66 rating. So it's not as bad as these 3, but little better than Hearinthenowfrontier, Q2K. My biggest issue, well, there's several issues with this album. Number 1, it's really short. These are the studio songs that are on the album, and they make up 34 minutes. Like I said, OperationMindcrime was a 64-minute album. Now you have a full-length album in the year 2013. It's only 34 minutes. They did augment it with 3 live songs. Totally unnecessary. Did not contribute anything. So this is looking just at the studio songs. This, again, is one that's lacking in ambition. Again, very few instrumental sections or lengthy intros or outros. The other problem is that the songs are instantly forgettable. Like, when you're listening to them, they sound pretty good, but there's not a single hook, there's not a single infectious vocal melody, there's not a single guitar melody that you hum. And you think about songs like YYZ by Rush. It's not even a vocal. It's just it's instrumental, but the melody is infectious. None of that here. It's a better deal. It's better songwriting. It's back to what they could do well, which is that 80s kind of proggy metal. But and it was good to see like them get over all that dysfunction that was existing when the band kind of fell apart in that ugly period there. 2 years later, I think, 2015, we get ConditionHuman, and look at that, in 83. So outside of Mindcrime II, the best album since the band's peak period. And in many ways, this was them simply, it's the same guys as we had on the previous album, but this is a more mature and a more ambitious effort, especially the song ConditionHuman, which is like 7 minutes long and is a true progressive metal classic. That song is really, really great, and in my opinion, wow, these guys are capable of this. I wish they would do more of that, because some of these songs are more like the 3-minute version songs that we got on the previous album. Still, Arrow of Time, really great intro. This one right here is the kind of proggy thing they were doing. It's actually 2 songs, All There Was and The Aftermath, but it has a very proggy kind of device where the song is ending and then they tacked on like a minute-long kind of coda onto it that features mostly Todd Latour on the vocals, and it works really great. So for me, this was a really, really good album, and was by far the best thing the band had done in many, many years. I do think if I went back and rated this now, I think I would knock a few of these down, and we'd probably end up with about a 75 as opposed to 83, because when I was listening to it in prep for this video, I was like, I'm not real sure that's an 80, but I left them in as that. 2 years, it's 4 years later. I should point out that with Todd Latour, Tori, and then the 3 other members, they also had Parker Lundgren, I think is his name, as the other guitarist. And then Scott Rockenfield kind of stopped touring with the band, and I'm not sure he's really... So you're really only left with 2 original members, which is Eddie Jackson on bass and Michael Wilton on guitar at this point. Now, TheVerdict, to me, was disappointing, because after ConditionHuman, I thought, hey, these guys seem to be getting better. This was much better than the first album from them. But this album is just generic. That's the word that strikes me about a lot of this late era Queensrÿche, is it doesn't distinguish itself from other bands or other styles of music in any notable way. These songs are mostly forgettable. Again, I don't know. This is the thing that I'm conflicted about it. I put any of these songs on, and while I'm listening to it, I'm generally like, this is pretty cool. I enjoy listening to it. But there's just nothing memorable or remarkable about it. And they all just kind of blend into each other. They cannot write that anthemic chorus. None of these songs have that. And that's the one thing that's really missing, in my opinion. That and any sort of infectious hook. You go back to those early days of Queensrÿche, and they had especially guitar melodies that just reeled you in, and you kind of instantly could understand what the band was trying to do. That stuff is missing here, and so it's got this kind of dense kind of... the music is dense and not as approachable, because it doesn't have those anthemic choruses or those fun to sing along with choruses, and they don't have those great guitar melodies that are, serve as a hook and reel you in. I did see them. In fact, the last social event that I attended prior to the onset of the pandemic in 2020 was this version of the band touring on this album, TheVerdict, and they were great. It was a small club, but they put on a great show. Finally, we have 2022's DigitalNoiseAlliance, which is again the same group of guys. And it's basically, they're not evolving, they're not changing. It's the same type of music, and it suffers from the same challenges that we've had, where pretty good, it's got that prog metal, vibe to it, but the songwriting just can't get there. These songs are not memorable. They did tack on a cover of Rebel Yell at the end, which was, again, ill-advised. If you're not better or you're not different than the original, then there's really no need to cover the song. So that's where we are with what was, during my late teenage and in pretty much all of my 20s, my favorite band, Queensrÿche. Let's see how my rankings compare to others. This red line is from the Progressive Archives site. I've mentioned that on pretty much all my videos. Progressive Archives is a user-generated site, so these aggregate lots of reviews from lots of people. And you can see that two things stand out. One, I'm almost always higher than what the Progressive Archives crowd thinks. Almost every one of these. And then the second thing is they largely feel the same way I do about this period, really good, this period, not so good, this period, really bad, and then a return to form here. And I do have to say this, towards these last three albums, the Prog Archive crowd thinks better of them than I do, here, here, and here. And let's just say I disagree with them on these. I don't think these albums are, of this level. But they do think less of ConditionHuman than I do, so that's interesting. The Metal Music Archives, which is also an aggregator site that looks at metal bands, their scores are almost identical to the Progressive Archives crowd, although this insanity here at the end where they've got DigitalNoiseAlliance as like almost a 90, I don't know where that's coming from, and I wonder how many people actually contributed to that score. Like, it might be only 6 or 7 people made that score. I don't know. But you can see that overall, everybody agrees this peak period here is really good, that they're better now than they were from, from the mid-90s to the mid-aughts was just a real dark period where the band did little very well. And while others like Mindcrime II, they don't like it as much as I do. Alright, I do want to point out that there are about a dozen, I think it's actually 10 songs that the band has created in the studio that do not show up on their albums. Actually, let's look at this first. This is a summary showing that out of their songs, 46 are rated 100 by me, 45 as an 80. So that's almost 90 songs that are 4 or a 5-star song, which is really great. 72 that are 3-star songs, but we've got quite a few, only 2-star songs, which 20 of these, and then 3 that are just abysmal and bad. Now here's the 10 songs that I said do not show up on any official albums, so these are like bonus songs. Some of these are alternative versions of songs that the band covered. So you see I Dream in Infrared. This is just an acoustic version of that album. That the song is not much different and isn't all that great. Someone Else with full band. This is if you remember, Someone Else was a piano and voice ballad that was the last song on Promised Land. And it was a 5-star song. It's a great song because of Geoff Tate's vocals mostly. But here we have a full band version of it, and this is about 8 minutes long. It has an additional verse of lyrics, and it's full band. And this is a classic Queensrÿche, prog rock mini epic. It's like 8 minutes long. Really, really outstanding song. Scarborough Fair. This is a cover of the Simon and Garfunkel song. This is different. It's also better. So here you have a cover that is justified because it's better and it's different. Real World was a song from the Last Action Hero soundtrack, and this is a quintessential Queensrÿche song. It's got kind of a slow ballady build-up, and then when it goes into the break, they create this collage of sounds. It does not sound like guys playing guitars and drums, even though it is, but it creates this kind of oral soundscape that builds and builds and builds until the final end. Really good songs. The rest of these, Prophecy is from the Warning recordings and sounds like those songs, but there's a good reason it was left off the album. Dirty Little Secret and Last Time in Paris are fairly generic rockers that are okay, and then Chasing Blue Sky, same thing, it's okay. All right, I am a big live music DVD fan, okay? I own a lot of live music DVDs that I've ripped to my computer and created this kind of what I call a video jukebox. I've got more than 5,000 songs on there. And Queensrÿche has a pretty good library of live music DVDs. So let's go through these. Live in Tokyo is not an official release. It's a bootleg. Be warned, if you go looking for it, you're not going to find an official version of this. The quality of what you get can be as high or as low as a bootleg. It is great because it captures the band before they became famous and superstars, and has them in their prove it mode playing in Japan, and the set list is great because all those songs back then were great. Then we get Operation Live Crime. So this is when they were doing the Empire tour but presenting Operation Live Crime in its entirety, and you get the entire album Operation Mindcrime done live. High production values. It does suffer from that. This was recorded in 1992, I think, or 91. And all the videos back then had all the fast edits and stupid editing effects. It does suffer from that. But a great set list, great performance. I do wish they had recorded the entire show, not just the Operation Mindcrime part of it. To be fair, Building Empires, which is half music videos and then half live DVDs. I'm only addressing the live DVD portion part here. Pretty much made up of the rest of the show from that Empire tour. The one song that's missing that is criminal in my opinion is Roads to Madness. Roads to Madness absolutely needed to be included here, and then we would have had the entire show. Live Evolution was recorded in 2001. And it was a career-spanning show that they did at the famous Moore Theater in their hometown of Seattle. This is a great show, great recording, high production values, really, really good stuff. The only thing that mars it is that we have Kelly Gray on guitar. He is not a good guitarist. That's not fair. He's a competent guitarist, but he's not Chris DeGarmo or Michael Wilton level guitarist, all right? And then the set list suffers a little bit because you get a substantial amount of like Q2K on there, and that's not great. The Art Alive was recorded just a couple of years later when they were on the tour with Dream Theater, and this I rate pretty high. It suffers from, they put some kind of video filter on it, I guess a sepia tone filter, and so it just looks ugly. Other than that, it's a good show, and specifically it's got 2 songs recorded when Dream Theater and Queensrÿche were on stage playing together, and they do Comfortably Numb and Won't Get Fooled Again, 2 covers, and they do them really good, and it's cool to see them on stage together playing, and it's really neat. I just wish that they'd done the songs that I saw when I saw them on that tour, which was Real World and The Spirit Carries On by Dream Theater. I'd rather see them play their own songs as opposed to playing covers like this. They do really good versions of the covers. And then the last one is the one that I mentioned before. This is a 2 DVD set. Again, the band playing at Moore Theater in Seattle and doing that show I talked about where they did all of Operation Mindcrime I, all of Operation Mindcrime II. It is the best presentation of the Operation Mindcrime story, in my opinion. I think it's great. Let's see how others feel about it when we go to look at what Progressive Archives says. They pretty much feel the same way I do about all of these except for the Art of Live, and again, that's that one with that weird sepia filter that I could see why others don't like it. Otherwise, however, you can see I think all of these DVDs are really high quality. The Progressive Archives group thinks so. The Metal Music Archives guys, they also think so. These are good. I'm happy that when you add all this up, I think we have like 85 or 90 live songs performed by Queensrÿche on video, and that's really good. Looking at their actual... Oh, that's it. I forgot. I was going to say, looking at their actual live releases, they've just mimicked the DVDs. If you got a DVD, they also have a live CD. And I don't think there's any live CDs out there that are not also available as a DVD. So that's it. That is my take on the Queensrÿche catalog. I hope you enjoyed it. If you made it all this time, you got to hit that like button. So thank you. I'm out.